I never thought I'd be the type of person to create a contract for family members, but when my mother-in-law announced she was selling her house to move in with us, just until she found a new place, I knew words alone wouldn't protect our sanity. My name is Samantha Wilson, a physical therapist with a growing telehealth practice and a part-time position at Memorial Hospital. For the past 3 years, I've maintained a home office where I conduct virtual appointments and complete patient paperwork, allowing me to balance clinical work with family life. My husband Josh and I have been married for 5 years, building our life carefully in our modest 3-bedroom home in the suburbs of Chicago. The look on Margaret's face when I slid that document across the table, priceless. She thought she was getting a key to our kingdom. Instead, she got a reality check in 12-point font. I'll never forget that Sunday afternoon in September. The crisp autumn air had just begun to turn chilly, and I'd spent the entire morning transforming our back patio into a cozy retreat. String lights twinkled overhead. New cushions brightened our wicker furniture, and my prized collection of container herbs created a fragrant boundary around our space. This was my sanctuary, the place where Josh and I ended each day, mugs of tea in hand, sharing stories from our separate worlds before they merged again in our home. I was adjusting the last pot of rosemary when the doorbell rang. Not once, which would be normal, not twice, which might indicate impatience. 3 times in rapid succession, followed by knocking. Only one person in our lives announced themselves with such dramatic urgency. My mother-in-law, Margaret. Josh, Samantha. Are you home? Her voice carried through the open windows. I took a deep breath, brushed the soil from my gardening gloves, and headed inside. Josh was already at the door, his expression a familiar mix of affection and weariness that appeared whenever his mother made an unannounced visit. Mom, this is a surprise, he said, accepting her embrace. Is everything okay? Margaret Wilson, former high school principal, perpetual organizer of other people's lives, and my matrimonial cross to bear for the past 5 years, swept into our living room with the authority of someone who owned the place, rather than someone who visited occasionally. Can't a mother check on her son without there being an emergency? She placed her designer purse on our coffee table directly on top of the book I'd been reading. Though now that you mention it, there is something important we need to discuss. My stomach tightened in Margaret's vocabulary. Something important, usually translated to something Samantha won't like but will be expected to accept graciously. I slipped my hand into Josh's, a silent signal we'd developed over years of navigating his mother's important discussions. Let me make some tea, I offered, needing a moment to compose myself. No need, dear, Margaret waved dismissively. This won't take long. Josh gestured toward the couch. Let's sit, Mom is Dad, okay? The concern in his voice was genuine. Robert had suffered a moderate heart attack 3 months ago, and though he'd been progressing through cardiac rehabilitation, his recovery had been slower than expected. His cardiologist had recommended significant lifestyle changes, including avoiding stairs as much as possible during the first 6 months of recovery. Your father is managing, she said, settling primly on our sofa. But that's actually related to what I need to discuss. You know we've been talking about downsizing since his health scare? Josh nodded. The stairs in your house aren't ideal for his recovery. Exactly. Margaret smiled approvingly, like a teacher whose student had arrived at the correct answer. Well, I've made a decision. I'm selling the house. That's probably wise, I said, relief washing over me. The Wilsons' 2-story colonial was far too large for 2 people, especially with Robert's mobility issues. Have you found a nice single-level place? Margaret's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Not exactly. The market is so competitive right now, properties are being snatched up before they're even officially listed. Something in her tone made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I'd spent enough time with my mother-in-law to recognize when she was circling her actual point. That sounds frustrating, Josh said, oblivious to the warning signals flaring in my mind. Indeed it has been, Margaret replied, reaching over to pat his knee. And what your father and I have decided is best, is to move in with you two. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Move in? I repeated, certain I'd misheard. Just temporarily. She added quickly, though the word held no reassurance. Until we find the perfect place, I've already listed our house with Caroline. You remember her? Josh, she was your math teacher in 10th grade, and she thinks it will sell within weeks. I glanced at Josh, whose expression had frozen somewhere between shock and panic. Mom, that's a big decision. One we should probably discuss as a family. That's what we're doing now, dear. Her tone suggested this was merely a formality, not an actual consultation. Your father and I thought it through carefully. It makes perfect sense. You have that spare bedroom just sitting empty except for Samantha's little crafting projects, and the guest room can store some of our essentials until we find our new home. My crafting projects. She meant my home office, where I conducted telehealth appointments and did all my patient paperwork. The space that allowed me to work from home 2 days a week and maintain my private physical therapy practice alongside my hospital position. Margaret, I began carefully. My office isn't a spare room. I see patients there. It's essential for my practice. She waved this away like an annoying fly. You can easily move all that to the basement. It's finished space, going to waste. Besides, your father needs a proper bedroom on the main floor during his recovery. Before I could respond, Josh intervened. Mom, we can't just make a decision like this on the spot. Samantha and I need to talk it over. How soon were you thinking this would happen? Margaret's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened slightly. Well, as I said, the house is already on the market. Caroline is holding an open house next weekend. We've started packing some essentials, but the full move would happen after we secure a buyer. So, not immediately, I asked, trying to get clarity on her timeline. The doctor has advised that Robert should minimize stair use within the next month. Margaret replied carefully. I was hoping we could begin transitioning some of our things next Wednesday, just to prepare the space. Robert would likely join me within 2 weeks, depending on how quickly the house sells. I looked at Josh, silently pleading for him to recognize the manipulation at play. His father's health was being used as a battering ram against our boundaries, a strategy Margaret had employed with increasing frequency since Robert's heart attack. That night, after Margaret left with promises to call the next day for our decision, Josh and I had a long, difficult conversation. We need clear terms written down, agreed upon in advance. I insisted. Like a contract. Josh looked puzzled. Exactly like a contract. A house rules agreement that spells out expectations, responsibilities, and boundaries. His eyebrows shot up. Mom will hate that. Probably, I agreed. But if she refuses reasonable boundaries, that tells us something important about her intentions, doesn't it? Josh was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. I could see him weighing family peace against the protection of our marriage. It wasn't an easy calculation. Margaret had spent decades ensuring that her son's loyalty would be difficult to redirect. What would this contract even say? He finally asked. I felt a small surge of hope. He wasn't dismissing the idea outright. Basic, respectful household guidelines, privacy expectations, consultation before making changes to our home, defined duration of stay, financial contributions. Financial contributions? Josh looked alarmed. Mom will definitely push back on that. They're selling their house, Josh. They'll have funds, and if they're living here using utilities, eating food we buy, they should contribute. That's reasonable. He nodded reluctantly. I guess so. But approaching this like a business transaction feels cold. Colder than being told to move my professional practice to the basement. Colder than having our living room furniture rearranged without our input. I tried to keep the hurt from my voice but wasn't entirely successful. Josh reached for my hand. You're right. I'm sorry Mom has always been forceful, but that doesn't make it okay. This isn't about punishing your mom, I said, squeezing his hand. It's about protecting our marriage and our home. If we don't establish boundaries now, before they move in, we never will. He was silent for a long moment, then nodded decisively. Okay, let's write this contract, but we do it together and we present it to them together. United front. Relief washed over me. United front. I agreed, leaning in to kiss him gently. That's all I'm asking for. The weekend before the open house arrived too quickly. I'd spent the week alternating between rehearsing my talking points and distracting myself with work. Now, as I chopped vegetables for dinner, my stomach churned with anxiety. We'd prepared a family living agreement that was firm but fair. With my friend Lisa's help, she's a family law attorney. We'd created a document that established clear boundaries while still supporting Robert's recovery needs: 6-month maximum stay, financial contribution to expenses, privacy guidelines. My office remaining my office. All reasonable expectations for adults sharing a living space. Josh had printed 2 copies each in a crisp blue folder. The sight made everything feel suddenly very real. We were really doing this setting formal boundaries with his parents in writing. Robert arrived first, leaning on his cane, but looking stronger than I'd expected. His cardiac rehabilitation was showing results, though he still moved cautiously and needed to rest frequently. Margaret followed, carrying a bakery box and scrutinizing our dining room with her usual critical eye. Dinner began pleasantly enough. As we finished the main course, Josh caught my eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. It was time. So, he began, his voice carefully casual. Samantha and I have been discussing your move-in plans. Margaret brightened. Yes, I've made a list of what furniture we'll bring. Nothing too large, just Robert's recliner. He needs proper back support and my cherrywood bureau. Oh, and our bed, of course. That guest room mattress is far too soft for Robert's back. I felt a flash of irritation. She was already planning to replace our furniture before even moving in. Actually, Mom, Josh continued steadily, before we finalize any details, we wanted to discuss some parameters that will make this arrangement work for everyone. Margaret's smile faltered slightly. Parameters. Yes. I joined in, keeping my tone light. Since we'll be sharing living space, we thought it would be helpful to have clear expectations from the beginning. Robert nodded thoughtfully. Makes good sense. Clear communication prevents misunderstandings. I noticed he seemed less submissive to Margaret than usual, maintaining eye contact with us rather than deferring to his wife's reactions. Margaret looked less convinced, but said nothing as Josh reached for the blue folders beside his plate. We've put together a family living agreement, he explained, sliding a folder toward each of his parents. Just to make sure we're all on the same page about how this temporary arrangement will work. An agreement. Margaret's voice sharpened as she opened the folder. What is this, a rental contract? We're family, not tenants. It's not a rental contract, I said carefully. It's a mutual understanding of boundaries and expectations. Robert adjusted his reading glasses and began scanning the document with interest. Margaret, however, barely glanced at the first page before looking up, her expression hardening. Financial contribution you expect us to pay you after everything we've done for you. Josh remained calm. It's a reasonable sharing of expenses, Mom. You and Dad will be using utilities, sharing meals, occupying space. We're not asking for profit, just help with the increased costs. This is offensive, she declared, pushing the folder away. Your father is recovering from a heart attack, and you're treating us like boarders in a rooming house. No one is treating you like boarders, I said, fighting to keep my voice even. We're acknowledging the reality that 4 adults living together requires structure and shared responsibility. Robert, who had been quietly reading through the entire document, looked up. The financial contribution seems reasonable, Margaret. We'll have funds from the house sale sitting in an account doing nothing. Why shouldn't we help with expenses? Margaret shot him a look of surprised betrayal. That's not the point, Robert. Then what is the point? He asked mildly. The conversation continued, cycling through Margaret's various objections. The 6-month limit, the privacy guidelines, my office remaining off limits. Throughout it all, Robert remained surprisingly supportive of our position, gently contradicting his wife several times. I'd never seen him stand up to her so directly before. and from Margaret's expression, neither had she. "Sit down, Margaret," he said at one point when she'd threatened to leave. His tone, quiet but uncompromising, seemed to surprise everyone at the table, Margaret most of all. By the end of the evening, Robert had not only endorsed our agreement, but offered constructive suggestions to improve it. Margaret remained resistant, but had at least agreed to review the document more carefully at home. As they left, Robert squeezed my hand. "Thank you for your honesty, Samantha. It's refreshing." 2 weeks passed with tense phone calls, but no resolution. The Wilsons' house had drawn serious interest at the open house, and Caroline was confident they would have an offer within days. The pressure was mounting. Then came a phone call. We never expected. Robert called Josh directly, asking to meet for lunch alone. When Josh returned from that meeting, his expression was a mix of shock and concern. "Dad says he's been unhappy for years," he told me quietly. The heart attack made him reevaluate everything he said. Our contract was the first time anyone had stood up to Mom in decades, and it made him realize how much he's given up. Over the next month, the situation evolved in ways none of us could have predicted. Robert and Margaret entered marriage counseling at Robert's insistence. During these sessions, years of resentment and communication issues surfaced. Robert revealed he'd been considering separation for nearly a decade, but hadn't found the courage to confront the problems in their marriage. The Wilsons sold their house, but instead of moving in with us, they rented separate apartments in the same senior-friendly complex. Robert's cardiac rehabilitation continued to progress well, and his new single-level apartment eliminated the stair concerns. The physical distance seemed to improve their relationship as they worked through their issues in therapy. Margaret initially blamed us for breaking up their marriage, but Josh's sister Lisa, after her initial shock, eventually acknowledged that their parents' relationship had been strained for years. Robert seemed happier and more engaged than any of us could remember. 6 months after our dinner with the contract, Josh and I created our own relationship agreement, not because we needed it for conflict resolution, but as a proactive commitment to communication and mutual respect. A blueprint for the marriage we wanted to build. That house rules contract, the document that launched 1,000 family revelations, had ultimately offered liberation. Not just for Josh and me, but for an entire family trapped in decades of unhealthy patterns. Some might call it just a boundary agreement. I knew better. It was nothing less than a declaration of relational independence, the beginning of a healthier story for all of us.